Donald Trump is doubling down on his vow to be an American dictator, which he maintains would only be for one day.
Baker today in the New York Times, he said that I want to be a dictator. I didn't say that. I said I want to be a dictator for one day. But the New York Times said, and you know why I wanted to be a dictator? Because I want a wall, right? I want a wall, and I want to drill, drill, drill.
Those comments coming during an 80-minute airing of grievances last night at a soiree filled with Trump loyalists and MAGA diehards. The former president, who is waging what he has called a righteous crusade, touted the criminal indictments against him and took aim at his likely Democratic rival for the White House, accusing President Biden with no evidence of weaponizing the Justice Department for political purposes and suggesting that he would use a second presidential term, a second Trump term, to go after Biden.
These are Biden indictments against this is just against a political opponent. But they've opened up a Pandora's box, and I only can say to Joe is, be very careful what you wish for, because what you've done is a terrible thing.
Let's discuss more now with CNN senior political commentator Scott Jennings, Democratic strategist Chuck Rocha, and former Republican Congressman Joe Walsh of Illinois. Joe, let me start with you. What do you make of all this dictator talk?
Jim, two thoughts. The first thing that comes to mind is I don't think any of it's funny, and I don't think we should dismiss it. Mitt Romney and so many other Republicans out there, 7, 8 years after Trump came on the scene, and they're still just trying to dismiss what this guy has said. He said, Jim, that if he's reelected, he'll shut down media outlets he doesn't like, and he'll imprison his political opponents. He has said stuff like that. Don't dismiss it. Don't laugh at it. It needs to be condemned by Republicans. The second thing I'd say, Jim, is there's a sizable chunk of the Republican Party base that want this. They want a strong man in office, which is why Trump's way ahead in the polls.
Yeah, I mean, Scott, we're seeing varying reactions in the GOP to what Trump has been saying. This is what Mitt Romney had to say. Let's listen to that.
Donald Trump is kind of a human gumball machine, which is a thought or a notion comes in and it comes out of his mouth. I don't attach an enormous amount of impact to the particular words that come out and try to evaluate each one of them. I do think you can look at his record as president, and particularly in the last months of his presidency, and say, this is a dangerous approach, it's an authoritarian approach. That gives me far more concern than him playing to the crowd as he did.
I mean, Scott, I think this gumball has a sour taste to it. What do you think? I mean, it seems to me that you have to take Trump for what he's saying here.
To me, the issues that are most noteworthy are the promises for retribution. I think the dictator talk is, he's trying to get everybody worked up about that and make a point, whatever. To me, though, the retribution is the key issue. The idea that you would use the federal government to go after people. That's obviously how Trump feels that Joe Biden has played it. But looking ahead, trying to win an election, thinking about what it would look like if you did win an election, the concept that the federal government as a promise would be weaponized for the purpose of vengeance and retribution, that really does need to stop, and that cannot be part of his campaign. I would also say that, Republicans feel the way they feel about this, but I just think if you're trying to win the race, for Donald Trump eventually, that kind of talk right there is going to be an anvil on the Republican Party's head, because people do not want that promise hanging out there that our government is essentially a bludgeoning tool against the people that we hate.
Yeah, I mean, Chuck, in this country, I guess if Trump pulls this off, he would be the first candidate where somebody has said, okay, yeah, I'll vote for the guy who wants to be a dictator. I'll vote for the dictator. But let me show you this polling, Chuck, from the Wall Street Journal. Trump beating President Biden by 4 points in a hypothetical rematch next year. I mean, this extreme rhetoric, and we've been talking about this for how many years now? 8 years now?
Yeah, a long time.
It is not affecting him to a large degree.
I think people don't understand that the electorate has changed. It's changed a lot. And what he knows, he can read the polls like we can read the polls. He's doing really well, but he's guaranteed, he is really, really relying on bringing new people that normally don't participate. The folks that vote in every election, especially moderate women in the suburbs of Philadelphia or Milwaukee, they're done with Donald Trump. They've shown that in voting for Democrats over and over again, at least at the top of the ticket, and he knows he's lost some of that support. So the way, as a political strategist, to get new people to show up is throw them a dictator for a day thing. Give them the grievance politics while Joe Biden's trying to say, this is what many jobs we've created, here's what my plan is, we need to make sure we protect democracy. But he knows, and I know his consultants know this, is that they've got to go find new people who normally don't participate in the election, and the way that you do that is with some of the crazy talk that I think you've been hearing.
Yeah. And Joe, I mean, one thing that we saw this weekend is, and the president did this out at some fundraisers out in California, it was behind closed doors, so the remarks are not on camera, but he was going after Trump for engaging in this dictator rhetoric. Is that more of what you think we need to see from the president on this?
I think he has to lead on this, Jim. I think this is what he did, Joe Biden, in 2022 when he talked about defending democracy, when he said democracy was on the ballot, and it squelched the so-called red wave in 22. Yes, I think Joe Biden needs to wrap himself in 2024 around democracy and tell the American people and challenge the American people that this is an election about democracy again. Democracy against authoritarianism. Because I do not believe this is a joke or dismissive talk or crazy talk by Trump. I think he believes this, and Biden's got to call it out.
Well, there was an 11th hour surprise reversal from Donald Trump. He says now he will not testify at a civil fraud trial in New York. Remember, Trump had vowed to retake the witness stand against the advice of his legal team in the case that threatens the future of his family real estate empire. But in a very long-winded post on Truth Social yesterday, he wrote in part, quote, "I have already testified to everything and have nothing more to say other than that this is a complete and total election interference. Biden campaign exclamation point, witch hunt. That will do nothing but keep businesses out of New York." CNN's Kristen Holmes joins us now. The exclamation point aside, the reversal here. Were you surprised, and why?
Well, we were surprised just given that he had been so adamant that he wanted to testify. Now, there have been questions about whether or not the gag order had something to do with this. His attorney said there was nothing left for Trump to say to a judge who had issued this unconstitutional gag order on Trump. But the gag order was really completely irrelevant to any testimony that he would have. He could still answer direct questions about this case. And as you mentioned, several of his attorneys had warned him that it would not be a great idea to take the stand. And this really isn't the first time, or probably will be the last time, that we've heard this. Donald Trump pushing to take the stand, saying that he's going to testify in various legal cases, and then at the 11th hour, his attorneys convincing him that it is a bad idea. And when you look at it, it really comes down to risk and reward. Remember, he already did testify in this case. He had a very contentious day in court where he went back and forth with the judge. There wasn't much left to say because he had answered so many of those questions. So whether or not what the risk-reward factor was, they decided ultimately that there was greater risk than reward in him taking the stand.
So court's dark today, I think, right? Because he's not testifying. What happens starting tomorrow and just where this goes? Because this is a judge is going to decide, not a jury.
Right. So this case is actually expected to wrap up this week. They have an expert that is testifying again tomorrow. We saw him last week. He's going back into court tomorrow. And they do expect this to be done, the defense to rest, but no decision to be made until early next year. And really what we're watching now is this navigation between Donald Trump's political campaign and the legal side, because he also has another court case or another trial coming up in March, right as those primaries, caucuses, everything is ramping up. So it's really becoming a balancing act for Donald Trump and his campaign as he tries to run for president and also has a number of legal trials pending.
All right, Kristen Holmes for us from Washington. Thank you.